Hi, welcome to the Legal Insurrection Podcast. My name is Kimberly Kay, and I'm the Operations and Editorial Director with the Legal Insurrection Foundation. And I'm here today with our president and founder, Professor William Jacobson. And we're excited to be back. We haven't had a chance to sit down and chat about some of these things the last couple of weeks because we've been very busy doing the work we do at the Legal Insurrection Foundation. And so what we wanted to do this week is going to be a little bit different than what we've done in weeks past. We're going to tell you about some of the headlines that we as a foundation have actually generated from the work that we've done over the last 2 weeks. And also let you know that we have a very special guest in a podcast that we'll be recording later this week. And I'll let Professor Jacobson tell you a little bit about that. But yeah, so let's go ahead and jump in. I'm really excited though, because you would think that we would talk more about the work we do instead of sitting around opining about things happening in the world when we are actually driving some of the things happening in the world. So one of the first things that I wanted to bring to your attention is some of the work that we do with the Equal Protection Project. So at the Legal Insurrection Foundation, we have a handful of projects. We have the Legal Insurrection Foundation, where we do general education on free speech in academia. We deal with cancel culture, a whole world of things kind of under those umbrellas. We also have a site and a project called criticalrace.org, where we have cataloged over 700 institutions of higher education and all of the CRT and DEI activities happening on those campuses. And then we have the Equal Protection Project, which is the mechanism we have that allows us to take action, usually against discriminatory programs in higher education, though we are not limited to higher education and have branched out beyond that in many, many instances and look forward to doing that in the future. And so some of the work that we do with the Equal Protection Project includes taking legal action against discriminatory programs, scholarships, and things like that. And so, Professor Jacobson, would you like to talk a little bit about the complaint that we filed last week against UVA? And maybe we could explain kind of the issue with the program, why we chose to pursue legal action there, what that looks like, and what we typically see with these kinds of things, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah. Well, the complaint we filed against the University of Virginia is fairly typical of the now 44, I think it is, complaints we have filed. It was filed with the Office for Civil Rights of the U.S. Department of Education, which has jurisdiction over UVA because UVA, as almost every school in the country, receives funding from the U.S. Department of Education. And the program we challenged is also somewhat classic, has very stark racial delineations as to who is eligible. In the case of this, it was what they called a BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. It basically means non-white. It's a fancy acronym for non-white. So it's a program for BIPOC alumni to mentor BIPOC students. So it was discriminatory at two levels, but our concern was the student level because that's what implicates the Department of Education. And what it was basically a career mentoring program, but only open to non-white students. The program materials were very clear about that. There was no dispute about it. And so we challenged it. And University of Virginia fairly quickly, because we got a lot of publicity, including local TV and national coverage, Fox News, Daily Mail, a lot of people covered it, and they quickly backed down. So that we put that in the win column for us. They changed, they announced that they didn't announce, they just changed it. They quickly changed the programming and say it's now open to everybody. They didn't really apologize, and we'll see whether they live up to it. But that is a classic case for us. And we have had many, many cases like that. We've now had over 20 schools that have changed their programming based on our complaints. And the U Virginia was a classic example of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I absolutely love that we have transitioned into this kind of work. And if you're not aware, the Equal Protection Project is less than 2 years old. Um, and we've been able to accomplish everything that we have so far with just part-time help. So it's no small undertaking. Professor Jacobson does a ton of work there in ensuring that what we're doing will ultimately be successful. We are very selective, we're very careful. But the whole point is to signal to universities too that there's always a watchdog, even in red states, that you are not free to discriminate just because it's a cultural norm or something that's trying to be established as a cultural norm without potential repercussions. And what we found too is that universities don't want any part of the publicity storm that follows complaints like this. They don't want angry alumni or the people who have their names on buildings calling, asking, why this is in the press, why this is in the news. Um, and so, but ultimately, we want them to change what they're doing because it's the right thing to do. And because discrimination in any form is not okay. It's not who we are. It's not a value that we hold, not, as an organization or as a nation, really. And so it's really important to us that we pursue things like this.
We had another win just this week also, University of Wisconsin at Madison. Now, that's a complaint we filed back in January of this year, January of 2024, regarding another BIPOC program. BIPOC seems to be the name they like to use because they don't want to say non-white, because then everybody would know what it means. And so another BIPOC career-oriented program at the University of Wisconsin at Madison that we challenged. The Department of Education opened a formal investigation. That's really the first step in the process. It doesn't happen all the time, and sometimes it takes them months to do it. Sometimes they do it quickly. In the case of Madison, they did it within a month or two, so that was pretty good. They opened a formal investigation. And we just got a letter, I think it came in late last week, from the Department of Education indicating they were closing the case, they were dismissing the case because Wisconsin at Madison had changed the program. They removed BIPOC from the name of the program. They changed the description of the program, and they changed the eligibility criteria to eliminate any reference to it being racially restrictive. And so that's another one where it shouldn't have taken us to do that. And it's really astounding that all of these schools, with their massive bureaucracies devoted to non-discrimination, in fact, discriminate. And it's really only when there's publicity that they change. So, Madison changed recently. Last week or 2 weeks ago was a very big week for us. We also got notice that 3 schools we challenged in North Dakota changed their policies. We haven't even written that up at the website. We can't keep up
Right.
with telling people about all our victories. But just this month, and some of them are based on older events, but just in the last week or two, we've had 5 or 6 victories come in. We kind of joked internally that why are we getting these all the last week in September? And I think it may have been a bureaucratic reason that people get checked on their quarterly statistics, and people at the Department of Education were cleaning up their caseload in September. And so, it might be as simple as that. But really, just since September 1, we've had 5 or 6 victories, all things that we filed many months ago. We may even have more victories than we know of. But so far, we have, I think it's 21, including the one that just came in, 21 victories out of the 44 that we have filed so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic because as much as there is an effort, which of course is far more rampant and widespread than our tiny little organization, but as much as there's an effort to normalize these kinds of things as acceptable policies, acceptable practices, we're trying to normalize the fact that if an institution, no matter how large or small, engages in this kind of thing, that they can expect a legal challenge from us.
We've got such a good network now of people sending us tips that it's very common that we're filing a complaint within days of a new program starting. We did that at the
Yes.
University of Arkansas. They had another, this was a Black mentoring program for open to Black students only, Black graduate students only, a mentoring program through Walmart, actually in conjunction with Walmart and Sam's Club. And we filed the complaint within 2 weeks of them starting the program. And I think a lot of times they're wondering, how does this happen? And it's because we have a lot of sources. People come to us, and we have a track record of creating an atmosphere in which the schools know if they do this, they're going to get challenged. It was in Iowa, I believe, that the Iowa Regents schools, which is University of Iowa, Iowa State, and I can't remember what the third one is, but three large universities in Iowa on their own announced they were re-examining their policies with regard to race delineated scholarships in light of all the claims that have been filed against other schools. Now, they didn't quote us in their formal statement, but the Iowa Student newspaper quoted us as being the one who's filing a lot of these. So administrators are becoming conscious of it. They're becoming cautious of it. They are in some cases acting preemptively to avoid having a problem. And that's really what we want. We want them to not discriminate. Of course, are they going to discriminate behind closed doors? That's kind of the next stage in our project, I think,
Right.
is to monitor and to serve public records requests. But for now, they're putting it on their websites. And if they do, they'll be challenged quickly.
Sorry, my children decided to join me and sing songs about the Roman Empire because that's how we homeschool. So, and kind of in that same vein, on the critical race side of this, so we launched the critical race. It's criticalrace.org, which started off as a whole bunch of research that we decided to turn into a database instead of just publishing as a body of research on I think we started off with 80 schools, and it's about 3 years old now. And part of what we are starting to do there is to really analyze the data that we have. So we do have a great team of researchers there, and we're updating school entries that we have. We're building out new databases. But we're also moving more into data analysis there. And so a couple of weeks ago, we produced a report. And what we did is we dug into, we first looked at the states who had taken legislative action against CRT and DEI in higher education. So we looked at the legislative action that was taken. And then we looked at the larger schools within those states to see how those states have, or how those schools have responded, whether they have, completely followed the letter of the law or not. And really what we found is that, and we wrote about this even a year ago, I think it was at Fox News, we wrote about this, about how they're not really doing away with this ideology. And I think we know that, but we were able to essentially prove to some degree that they're just disbanding and dispersing the administrative arm that is responsible for hosting DEI and CRT initiatives on campus. And so we have a fantastic, very comprehensive report there. If you're listening and are curious about more of that, as always, we will put links to everything beneath the podcast or the video or however it is that you're listening or engaging with this. And so that was a really big report for us, not just because of the findings when we dug into this, but because it just goes to show that this is taking legislative action and trying to ban something never really eradicates something. And we know this, right? Like murder's banned. It still happens. Like there's a gazillion different examples of this. But if anything, my hope with this particular report is that it serves as something that's enlightening to state lawmakers, that they can look at the results and the findings of our report and maybe better discern how to take next steps to truly move to eradicate this kind of ideology that seeks to divide students, that seeks to pit students against their parents, and just fill them with all kinds of things that tear down the fabric of our society. And that's not hyperbolic to say. That's literally the goal with this. So that's something that we've we have cooking there, and we have several other reports where we're looking at. I'll You'll see eventually, but that we do have a couple of other reports cooking currently on the CRT site. Um, and then New York's Proposition 1, the Equal Rights Amendment. We've done a lot of work on that space too. I know that we released a statement about this. What was it, in April? Um, Talking about what it was. We had an op-ed in the New York Post last week where we discussed this a little bit more firmly. And then Professor Jacobson will be headed to New York City Wednesday um, to host or to participate in a press conference about this very important ballot initiative. And do you want to share a little bit more about what that is, why we have our hair on fire about this, and why people should care even if you don't live in New York? Because I think it looks like a test case to me.
Well, yeah, this is a good example that not everything we do at the Equal Protection Project is case oriented. That sometimes we seize on an issue and we focus on an issue that nobody else is focusing on. Just like we've done at the website, at the blog for 15 years, 16 years. And by the way, if you haven't seen my 12-minute 15th anniversary video, which is on the website and our YouTube channel, I strongly encourage you to watch it.
It's
But
Bill's most favorite thing ever. So please humor him and give him the view ticker.
Yeah. So it will be 12 minutes of your life you won't regret. Or if you do regret, just don't tell
Or get back.
me. But so we have identified an issue. So there's Proposition 1, which is the Equal Rights Amendment in New York State, which is going to be on the ballot in November. Equal Rights Amendment sounds nice, equal rights. There's two controversial parts of it. The first part, a lot of other people are focused on, which is adding new categories of protected class, such as gender identity, all those sort of things. And there are parents groups that are organizing that are concerned that a lot of the things added to the first part A of the Equal Rights Amendment, will interfere with parental rights, will interfere, for example, with girls' sports, could provide a New York State constitutional right for males to participate in girls' sports as long as they say they identify as girls. A whole host of issues that could be created by that. And so that's what everybody's focused on. And there's going to be a walkout, I think it's next week, organized of high school students around the state of New York protesting that this proposition could give people a right, could destroy girls' sports, basically. Uh, that's not what we're focused on. I
Mhm.
saw what nobody else seemed to see, which is Part B. The Part B sounds a little bit like fluffy language, and it says something, and I'm going to paraphrase it here, but I think pretty closely, that nothing herein shall prohibit any conduct or programs meant to dismantle discrimination, notwithstanding the parts of Provision A. So all the protections in Part A for race, sex, religion, and now they want to add other categories into it, are no longer a protection as long as the discrimination is done to dismantle discrimination. Now, because of our CRT website and our long history of followings, we see exactly what that is. That is, as long as you can claim there's systemic racism, that in a particular profession or a particular job or a particular school, that there's systemic racism and therefore there's a disparity, there's inequity, we're going to discriminate in order to get rid of that. That would now be a constitutional right in New York State under the New York State Constitution. That's frequently referred to as reverse racism. So to engage in racism, supposedly to eliminate racism. And so we blew the whistle on that. And we came out with a statement in April of this year when nobody else had mentioned that, and declaring our opposition to it. And we tried to get publicity, but nobody really wanted to listen to it. Nobody cared. And we kept at it for a long time. Now people are paying attention. The Wall Street Journal a week or two ago wrote an editorial castigating this new provision, specifically mentioning me and our opposition to Part B. Kimberly and I wrote an op-ed that ran a week or so ago in the New York Post on this. And now there's other articles being written about it. So now people are paying attention. And we're having a press conference that I'll be attending at City Hall Wednesday of this week. So 2 days from when we're recording this, we're recording it on a Monday, and trying to get media coverage. And so we want to call to attention how pernicious and tricky this is. And it's so bad that when they propose the ballot language, they have to open it up to public comment, the language that's actually be on the ballot. And I filed a public comment and objection and said, wait a second, the way you've described this is misleading. You don't mention anything about Part B. You don't mention anything about the reverse racism. You don't mention any of it. This is misleading. You've got to change the language. Well, needless to say, they ignored me. So the language they're going to have on there is basically the language they proposed. Nobody voting on that resolution, unless they took the time to go to the Board of Election website and read all about it, read the language, and maybe found what we've written on it about how pernicious this is. They have no idea what they are doing. In order to promote equal rights, they are actually destroying fundamental rights in New York State that are viable currently under the state constitution. And so we're trying to get attention for this, and I think we will get attention for it. I don't know how whether this measure will pass or not. I do know that virtually nobody is going to understand how destructive this thing is.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's why it's so important that, it's why we put so much time, attention, and effort into ensuring that the issue gets attention, not just for those living in New York who have an opportunity to vote on this, because politics are local, but they're also not anymore. I mean, we've seen that over the last decade, 15 years with the internet, comes awareness, so much more awareness of what's happening in other states at the local level, at the state level, things that they're attempting legislatively, things that large municipalities are attempting to implement. And this is a really big deal. And so, again, we'll have links to some of the things that we have discussed there that thoroughly flesh out our thoughts. But that's a great synopsis on this. And then lastly, we do have a special, and this is a first for the Legal Insurrection Podcast. We will have a guest with us later this week. And Mark Mitchell of Rasmussen. I always want to say Rasmussen, but I don't know if that's correct. I don't know. It's like being from Texas, I second guess. There's like a whole host of words where I am constantly second guessing if I'm pronouncing them correct or not. But anyway, he will be joining us later this week. And so we're really excited about that. Really excited about the opportunity to pick his brain a little bit. And then, of course, to share that with you. So do you have
forward to that because there's so much noise, and we've had in a couple of our segments talked about Operation Demoralize and the nonsense polls that were particularly used over the summer to try to demoralize Republicans and Trump supporters, to create a narrative that it's over. And now things are tightening, as they do all the time. And if you remember, I said over the summer, this is going to be a close election. Ignore all the nonsense going on in the media about how it's over. And sure enough, Kamala Harris is having a lot of problems. Who knows what the polls mean, but I'm really interested in talking to him about the mechanics of the polls, how it's actually done, how is it representative, and most of all, who answers these things? Okay.
Right?
I don't think I know anybody who's ever actually answered a poll. So how can we have representative? And that might be something that they take into account and have to adjust. But, I know for me, first of all, if somebody called me up on my cell phone, because I don't have a landline anymore, I wouldn't pick up the number if I don't recognize it.
My phone would screen it out like it does everybody that tries to call.
I did pick it up and somebody said, well, I'm from such and such polling company. I'd like to ask you, because it would be like click, hang up. I'm not going to tell you. And that's why I believe, and I want to talk to him about this. believe this is why there's such a Trump undercount in the polling
Yes.
traditionally. Okay,
Yes.
remember, particularly in swing states, national polling, the polls as they get close to election day and they start to realize we're going to be held accountable one of these days, they start to get a little better, and the overall vote totals percentages in the national polling weren't that far off. I'm talking about averages. Any one poll could be off. Weren't that far off from what really the popular vote was in 2016 and 20. But as we know, there's 6 to 8 swing states that are going to decide everything, and those have been off wildly. I remember, I think it was Wisconsin with Hillary. She was up 6 or 7 points, and Trump won it. And so I want to talk to him about that. Is there a secret Trump vote out there? Because I believe there is. I think Trump voters don't want to talk to strangers on the phone. Whereas if your Facebook feed is like mine, liberal voters love to talk to strangers about their opinions. But conservative voters and Trump voters don't want to deal with the nonsense and the crap that gets spewed at them if they express their view. And that's got to be a factor. And so I want to talk to him about these sort of things. How is it done? How do you, make sure you get accurate results? Rasmussen, however it's pronounced, maybe that'll be our first question to him. Uh,
How do
has
you
been
say
fairly
it?
consistent that Trump is up 2 nationally, and everybody else is kind of moving towards them. Okay, and they haven't really changed. So I'm going to be very interested because he's something of a contrarian voice in terms of their polling, much like Trafalgar and a couple of others. Uh, you know, and so I'm really looking forward to that, which will be taped later this week, and then we'll post it.
Yeah, I am too. I think it'll be very exciting. So just know if there are weeks that you're not hearing from us, it's because we're in the thick of doing the work. Because we are a foundation. We're not just a blog anymore. Those days are gone. Occasionally we pine for them, but we're also just so grateful and thankful that we have the opportunity to do the work that we do every day. And we will try to be better about sharing that with you too, because um, I do believe it's very important to be a consistent voice, and not just a voice in the ether. There's many voices in the ether, but to continue being an organization that is actually actively moving the needle and actively pushing back is something that we're proud of, and we're proud to be able to do that work. And we're thankful for those of you who are able to support the work that we do too, because I can assure you it all goes right back into being able to score the wins and the victories that Professor Jacobson was talking about earlier. So I think that's it for today, because we do have another full segment coming up this week, but it's been a while, so we just wanted to jump on and say hello to everyone, let y'all know what we've been up to. And you can find more about this episode at legalinsurrection.com/11. And we look forward to catching up with you again later this week. Thanks so much.